In my hometown, there is a haunted place called Rapunzel's Tower. It is an abandoned condominium building, and after many times of construction work, accidents happened to the workers who worked on the building, and the place was eventually abandoned. The name, Rapunzel's Tower, comes from the fairy tale of Rapunzel, and the tower was named Rapunzel's Tower because of the long black hair that hangs from the roof at night. In addition to the strange happenings on the rooftop, various other strange phenomena are said to occur on the way to the rooftop. According to a local psychic, it is like a den of floating spirits, an apartment where ghosts live, so to speak. My classmates and I decided to go to this extremely dangerous haunted place as a test of courage. My friend Ayuna, Reika, and I were the three of us. Let me tell you how we came to go to the haunted place in the first place. Ayuna and Reika were what you might call Gyarul, or gal, and I was just an ordinary high school girl who didn't dye her hair. But for some reason, we were on the same wavelength and often got along well. I had black hair, but Ayuna had dyed hers brown, and when it came to Reika, she was a complete blonde. Yuri is an honor student. Ayuna told me this without irony. Ayuna had dyed her hair as close to blonde as possible. It seemed that she had mentioned beauty and art colleges when we discussed her career path. My side had a deviation score of 60, so I was thinking of going to a good university. Reika said she was thinking of working after high school. The entrance exam was about a year away, but we headed for a letter test with the intention of strengthening our friendship. I thought that if we could go to a scary place and share our fears, it would strengthen our bond. I still regret that I should have stopped him at that time, even now that I have entered the university of my choice. It was around Halloween when we went to Rapunzel's Tower, a haunted place. The town was lined with haunted pumpkins, and many monster and ghost goods were sold in stores. The three of us talked about how we would like to have a costume party. And so, of all times, we headed for Rapunzel's Tower at the most dangerous time of the day, which is the time of the ox. Of all days. The place was truly eerie. It was an abandoned apartment building, and the lock on the fire escape door was broken, so anyone could enter. We were told by a boy who had gone there to test his courage that he had gotten creeped out around the 4th floor during the day and had to turn back. We were excited about the idea of going up to the roof. What if something really happened? Reika was cackling. If we go up to the rooftop, we can brag to the boys who left on the way up. Then, they might try to counter by spending the night on the rooftop. If we did that, we'd be legendary throughout the school. While talking like this, we opened the door to the fire escape and went inside. I feel a chill. I felt that first of all. It's bizarrely cold. Even though it was October, it was a chill like in the middle of winter. No, I can only call it a chill. When I tried to go up the stairs, I felt a tremendous pressure on my body. Ayuna and Reika were also pale. What do we do? Reika asked me and Ayuna. There was no way we were going to go back right away after coming all this way. We decided to at least climb up to the 4th floor where the boys had gone. The three of us climbed up the fire escape. As we were climbing from the 1st floor to the 2nd floor, and from the 2nd floor to the 3rd floor, for some reason we heard the sound of the boiler, even though there was no electricity in the building. We felt weird but decided to go up to the 4th floor at least, saying that we must have been hearing things in our ears. The boys went to the 4th floor hallway and came back very scared. If that was the case, we should at least go up there and brag about it. In the meantime, we arrived at the 4th floor. When we looked down the hallway on the fourth floor, we felt something like the presence of people. We heard a rattling, clattering, eerie sound. "Hey, what do you think that noise was?" I asked the other two. It was obviously someone in the house. I hear a mumbling sound, as if someone is talking. I asked the other two, "Let's go over there and take a look." It seemed that in this apartment, it was possible to peek into the rooms through the windows from the hallway outside. Ayuna and I decided to take a peek from the fourth-floor corridor into the room where we could see the presence of people. Reka said she would wait for us at the fire escape. The room where we heard noises had translucent windows, which allowed us to peek into the room. Ayuna and I decided to take a peek inside. At first, I had a hunch that it was someone else who had entered this haunted place earlier. When we peeked inside the house through the window, we found a dirty room with what looked like a lot of oversized garbage. There was a refrigerator, a microwave oven, and a TV that had been picked up from somewhere. Someone was laughing at the TV. Of course, there was no electricity, so the TV was not working. It was an old man with gray hair. He was laughing at the TV. He was probably a homeless person or something like that. He was using this abandoned apartment as a place to sleep. I was scared, but at the same time somewhat relieved. He was a living person. There are people living here. Somehow, Ayuna and I felt a sense of relief. Ayuna looked a little pale. She tugged on my sleeve and urged me to return to the fire escape. When we returned to the fire escape, Ayuna said something strange. My driver's license was on the floor. I think it was someone in that house. Ayuna has good eyesight. That was everyone's reputation. I didn't notice. I didn't recognize him. It was a portrait of a young man. I think it was just a picture of that old man when he was young. If I'm not mistaken, the issue date was recent, although I don't know what that means. Does that mean that that old man was young until recently? Ayuna had no idea what he meant. Ayuna says that the letters are indeed too small and that I may have misread them. She must have had better than 2.0 vision in both eyes. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to the rooftop and show off to the boys. Reka inspires us both. As we were climbing the fire escape, the wind began to pick up. We could also hear the sound of a ball bouncing from somewhere. We also heard the sound of something hard rolling around. I think all three of us had become somewhat stubborn. In the first place, we should have turned back at the fourth floor. We reached the 8th floor, the rooftop. The key to the rooftop was rusted and broken open. The three of us had reached the rooftop of Rapunzel's tower. The night wind was blowing strongly. When we actually arrived, it was a beautiful and slightly magical place with a beautiful night view in the twinkling distance. Ayuna and I approached the railing area and looked at the ground. It was as if something like a pitch-black abyss was peeking out from below. The strong wind was blowing my hair around and making it all messy. I can show off to the boys, Reka said triumphantly as she looked up at the moon in the center of the rooftop. I looked at the sky and saw a half-moon peeking through the clouds. The three of us decided to go home. I decided to brag to the boys about the homeless man living on the 4th floor and the eerie voices and sounds we had heard along the way. I think there was a part of them, including me, that was somewhat fearful. Reka and I decided to leave the rooftop after taking in the view, but for some reason Ayuna was the only one who wanted to stay. Ayuna, for some reason, was looking at the darkness on the ground from the railing, as if she were possessed. Her hair was fluttering in the wind. I'm going home. Reika urges Ayuna to go home. But Ayuna never stopped looking at the ground from the railing. I grabbed her arm and urged her to go back. Hey, let's go. You two can go ahead. I want to keep looking at this place. Ayuna smiles without even looking at me. I felt tremendously creeped out and even chilled by her profile. It was then that Reika and I finally noticed. Clearly, Ayuna was in a bad way. I shook her frantically, but she did not move at all. I want to stay in this place forever. I want to stay here forever. She was saying things like that. Reika rushed over and grabbed Ayuna, trying to pull her away from the railing. But the force was so strong that she pushed me and Reika away. Ayuna was in a bad way. She was mumbling something to herself. She was leaning over the railing. Her head was tossed about by the strong wind, a mess. I wish I could go to that place. Reika and I leaned forward and tried to pull Ayuna back somehow, but as if she had no sense of reality and was watching a scene from a movie or drama. Ayuna jumped off the roof of an 8th-story building. It's dark down there. There are no street lights in this area, and Ayuna's body cannot be found. Reika and I were screaming, not screaming. I couldn't keep up with my thoughts. Reika suddenly saw something else and was screaming with tears in her eyes. Yuri, look behind you, look behind you. Reika told me to turn around. A woman wearing tattered white clothes and with long, black hair hanging down approaches here. How long had she been there? Her hair was incredibly long and I could not see the end of it. I couldn't see the woman's face clearly, but she was certainly approaching us. Reika and I backed away. I think we were both crying. The woman in white takes aim at Reika and hugs her. Reika was frozen in fear, but when she saw the woman's face, for some reason she started giggling and had a big smile on her face. The woman in white moves her head and looks at me. I didn't know if I could call it a face. All kinds of human faces were plastered on the woman's face. Some were men, some were children, some were old men, and all sorts of countless little faces formed the woman's face with an expression of anguish. I was no longer in a position to help Reika. Desperate, I kept running, exiting the rooftop, down the stairs, and out of this abandoned apartment building. After that, my memory is fuzzy. Along the way, many times, I heard high-pitched laughter, as if I had gone insane, and I was almost pushed from behind. I also heard what sounded like chewing noises. I even remember that I managed to get down to the ground floor of this abandoned apartment building and got a cab on the way. After that, I apparently spent the rest of the day in bed. 2 days later, I went to school and was told that Ayuna and Reika had not come to school. They were both missing. Ayuna was surely dead. Even if she was lucky, she would be seriously injured. I wonder if anyone has passed by that abandoned apartment building. Half a month later, I was told that there was a high school girl wandering around inside Rapunzel's tower. She was said to be on the 2nd or 3rd floor of the building, with her shaggy blonde hair in disarray, talking to an empty space. Neighbors reportedly witnessed this, but the details are unknown. The color of her hair being blonde, it must have been Reika. She was fascinated by that abandoned apartment building and the dark-haired woman on top of the tower. I was so traumatized by that incident that I would never go near that place. And later on, I had a new question about that abandoned mansion. I was told a new story about the abandoned mansion. There is a rumor about the abandoned mansion, Rapunzel's tower. In the fairy tale of Rapunzel, there is a prince who is enchanted by Rapunzel in the tower. In the fairy tale, Rapunzel is said to have been trapped in the tower by an evil wizard. The being that is Rapunzel in that abandoned mansion has become a groundbreaking spirit because of her own grudge. The prince, who was enchanted by Rapunzel, has become a resident of the tower. It could be a floating spirit or a living person. If the enchanted one is a floating spirit, it turns into an evil spirit, and if it is a living person, it turns into a madman or a cripple and lives in the tower. Come to think of it, the homeless man on the 4th floor, I wonder if he is also a prince who has been enchanted by the tower. After all, Ayuna's body was never found. Reika's existence was forgotten as soon as she graduated, and their existence was forgotten by other students as well.